Well, good evening and welcome to the September meeting of the Greenways Open Space Committee meeting. Welcome back after July and August recess, and we'll convene the meeting starting at 7:02. Okay, at this time, would you please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I think our first order of business is approval of the June minutes. Hey, Theresa, okay. Approval of the June minutes. Thank you, Mr. Geist, for supplying those electronically for us, but you also have copies in front of you. Thank you. Okay. And take a minute to take a look at the minutes, if there's any questions.
I move to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Urbani to approve the minutes as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Geist. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None opposed. Any abstentions? Okay. Next order of business are the revisions or additions to the agenda. Take a minute to look over our agenda. And are there any revisions or additions to the agenda as you see?
So we're removing the presentation from David Hartwell.
That is interrogative, but yes. So would you like to make a motion to that in regard?
I move the removal of the presentation by David Hartwell, the St. James Green Team.
Second.
Any discussion? I can say that we had been approached by the Green Team of St. James Episcopal Church to expand and make connections with the community, and realizing that, go ahead, Theresa.
Do we need an action item to approve the welcome letter?
I would like to, would you like to add that to the agenda?
I would.
Okay. So add as action item number 3 to approve the welcome letter. Can we characterize that as a new welcome letter?
I guess.
Okay, or a revised welcome letter? So is there a second to approving the new revised welcome letter to the agenda?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bloetscher. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to add to the action item the revised welcome letter, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Any further additions or revisions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none?
Does that need to be on the agenda?
No. Okay. Mr. Bloetscher.
Thank you. As a township liaison, I'm providing you with an update for the open space greenways purchase program may be available to Greenways as a result of the township's desire to sell pieces of property that the township only owns, not Greenways and not wildlife or anything involving this commission, but as an opportunity perhaps to purchase. The township recently retained MBA Realty to provide an analysis on various township-owned properties. Those have been properties that have been either donated or forfeited for back taxes, things of that nature. There are no open space properties that are being listed for sale. The purpose of this is for the township to be able to unload some of the non-performing property that could be used and purchased by third parties so that they could add it to their existing parcel, or they could go ahead and build on there as they may see fit, and it therefore becomes productive taxes that'll be put on the tax rolls. So we do have MBA on board with that. They're performing their analysis. It is my understanding that once they have identified the properties that they believe have market value, we are going to, we, meaning the township board, are going to be looking to buyers for that. And it is my understanding that this commission will have an opportunity for those properties that are deemed to be valuable or have some importance for this commission and for Greenways and Open Space to participate in that purchase program. But again, we haven't identified the properties or the values put on those. This program is just starting. We do have MBA on board, and they're going to identify what properties are valued at, and then we're going to have an opportunity to decide whether or not we want to purchase those with open space funds. And that is the extent of the new news out of the township.
I just have a question. Does has MBA given us a timeline as to the completion of the analysis?
Have not heard that they're going to do anything. Part of it is there are a number of small parcels. There are a number, very limited number of larger pieces of maybe an acre or so. And but they're going to look at everything and come back with a package so that we can have an idea, as opposed to doing it piecemeal and saying, here's 10 for the month of September, here's 10 more for the month of October. Just as hypothetical examples, they're going to go ahead and say, hey, this is what you have that's out there. This is what makes sense from a realtor's perspective going forward to perhaps put this on the market and try and get some of this property back on the tax rolls. So there is no time limit on that, and I expect, knowing some of the people at MBA, they're not only going to be diligent, but they're going to give us some good numbers, and we're going to move forward with that.
Thank you.
That concludes my liaison report.
Mr. Trustee, when we had the work session and looked at, they gave us an fairly extensive list of properties. Are all those being will be evaluated by MBA, or?
Those have been presented to MBA for them to consider and to comment on. Some of the properties are very small. They might be landlocked and might not make much sense to be put into a purchase. As an example, if there's a half acre in the wildlife center space that's north of Horse Mill and east of Meridian, we might be looking at a situation where if it's landlocked, it doesn't have a market value, and therefore there may be no reason to have MBA go ahead and try and market something that's really not economically feasible to sell. But they're going to give us an idea what is available out there and at what cost, what price they'd recommend. So I can't say that they're going to look at every one of those parcels, because some of those, if you're going to use that as an example, it may be 1,000 feet away from a road, from utilities and any kind of infrastructure. And if you're looking at spending $500 to $1,000 for infrastructure, and you're 1,000 feet away from that, that piece of property is prohibitive, because it's $500,000 just to be able to develop it. Somebody could give it to you for free, and you're still not going to use it because it costs too much. So I hope that answers
Yes, thank
the
you.
question. And
You have, in many ways, taken care of one of our discussion items about property acquisition status, so we will, but we'll revisit that just briefly when we get to that point.
very good,
Good,
thank you.
thank you. Our next report is from the Grosse Hill Land and Nature Conservancy. Bert?
So the next nature photo contest, Take It Outside, has started as of September 1st, and high school students at Grosse Hill High School and local schools are invited to participate, and information is on the website. The last education program was viewing the American lotus from the airport natural area, and that was on August 20th. And other environmental education programs are planned.
Good. Thank you. Pam, anything with island beautification?
Just a couple of comments. We've been kind of inactive for the last few months, but we have a pair of sisters that have taken over the southeast corner at Four Corners, and they do a super job planting flowers and keeping it looking as cared for as possible. So luckily we have these two gals that have kind of taken over maintenance and planting of flowers at the southeast corner, which kind of mirrors what the garden club does on the southeast corner. These gals have taken over the northeast corner. And luckily we have a very active garden club that does the flower baskets on Macomb Street, and they do a flower pot at the historic marker on East River. So we're our Island Beautification Committee hasn't been as active as we have in the past, but we're lucky to have the garden club that handles a lot of the flowers, especially along Macomb Street with the hanging baskets.
Do we know the name of the two sisters?
Irma Slimko was on our beautification committee, and her sister moved to the island, and the two of them have sort of taken up the challenge of maintaining the northeast corner. So we're lucky to have them filling in to make that corner look as attractive as the garden club does on the southeast corner.
And I do have to say, and I think members of the commission will concur, that, you know, as you come onto GROSSE, regardless of whether you use the toll bridge or the free bridge, you know, it's striking right away that about how, first off, how clean it is, how green it is, how beautiful in terms of like some of the welcoming areas that we have. So,
Oh, and also Brian Medved, who's a middle school teacher, he was our chair of the beautification committee, and he's been maintaining flowers, planted flowers at the signboard as you come onto the island. So we're not as active as we have been in the past, but at least our chair, past chair, is keeping that looking cared for and blooming with flowers. So we aren't as active as we have been, but we have members that are handling some of the plants in a couple of the different planters on the island.
Good.
Mr. Chair, I have a question of
Yes.
Mrs. Frucci. Pam, you had, and were instrumental in the area next to Parkway and West Jefferson. And that was recently removed as a result of the burying of the line underneath the river. Any idea what's going to happen long term with that corner?
Well, there was, I remember back when that area was vacant, DTE Energy put rocks around, and we had a planted area. And I remember Brian Loftus back then when he was supervisor, a bunch of us went in there and planted flowers and some shrubs, and then DTE Energy said that they would take it over. But right now it looks so neglected, and my goal is to call DTE Energy and say, you need to get active again and pull the weeds out and at least make it look a little more presentable than it does now, because it's covered with weeds that are and it should be a more attractive entrance to the island than that weed bed there.
Very good, thank you.
Our new school liaison person is not here. I want to say school liaison officer, that tells you something, okay? But our school liaison, Cassandra Talaba, couldn't be with us this evening, but probably first day of school back for all students on GROSSE, and so I'm sure they're very excited about starting a new school year. But we certainly want to encourage student involvement and school involvement in terms of our Greenways Open Space Committee in any of the initiatives that we have. So that's a call out to certainly the schools and what we can do with them. So
Bill, is there any truth to the rumor that you woke up naturally this morning at 6 a.m. to get ready to go to
there's
school?
no truth to that rumor. And there were no tears in my eyes as I saw the little school children getting on the bus. Okay, so I was very happy. There were tears of happiness, if anything, that I was not going. Good, thank you. Theresa, you want to talk a little bit about the welcome letters?
Well,
Your mic might need to be on, I think. Thank you.
we thought that we needed a little updating to the letter because there was some people that said, hey, you know, I'm not new to the island. I just moved to another house. So this kind of applies to all residents and kind of puts the word out to, hey, if you want to be more involved, this is who we are. So the idea was to keep it short, one page, introduce the commission, Open Space Greenways Commission, and who was on there, and give information for anybody that wanted to find out more information or to volunteer or join the committee. So, so basically, it's a takeoff from Cliff's letter and just update it a little bit. And I think, Bill, you massaged it a little bit more, so.
But not much. A big, not necessarily a point of contention, but a big point of discussion, maybe Cliff and Carl can help us too, since you've been around on the commission for a while. If you look on the township website, it says Greenways Open Space Commission. If you do some research, and I know Mr. Geist has done some, as have I, if you go back to the original establishment of the committee, it was a committee. There was a revision in 2011 of the scope and the purpose and the function of the committee in 2011 that Cliff, I know that you proposed to the township and it was approved. So somewhere in the last 11 years, okay, from 2011 to current, we, I guess whether the name has changed or our status has improved, and so we're mincing words about semantics. But again, I think since it's an official program and part of the government of GROSSE, as a commission or a committee, I think we all need to get it straight. So that was one of the points, I think, when I was going back and I was just using. So I don't know if something happened between 2011 and 2022 that all of a sudden it became, it changed or transmogrified into something else, or I don't know. So Cliff.
Generally speaking, I've thought about the same thing for a number of years, and I've come to the conclusion that the difference between the committee and the commission is as follows. If we have a, like the Public Works Commission, there is a department consisting of paid employees and staff in the township that deals with public works. The same way with the police and fire department, and also the zoning commission. If there is a group of people or forming an organization which does not have say paid representatives on the township staff, we refer to those as committees. And that's I've never asked for an official definition, but that's the one that I've always used.
Okay,
So, again, if it's a committee, it's a group of people like ourselves who do not have, we don't have a department called Open Spaces. It's all a committee, it's all volunteers. Whereas if it's like the fire and police
Authority.
who have,
Right.
paid personnel,
Yeah.
it's a commission. So, and that's just my personal opinion.
Carol, you had?
Yeah.
agree.
Okay.
I agree.
And Mr. Chairman, to your point, the proposal, if that's the proper term, that was adopted and approved
Right.
in 2011, identified it as a committee. And I think
Right.
your question is, has there been other action taken by the
Something happened
township
between
board to
now and then. The
redefine
answer's
that?
no, okay. So perhaps we need to, we'll go by committee, so we will change the commission to committee.
We can-
Also, but please understand, when you go to the township website, it says commission. It also says when you are applying to join any of these committees or commissions, it says commission application. So we just need a point of,
But
that's
but
all.
when
We've been called worse, I am sure, and will be.
So
Okay.
But Mr. Chair, when you click on commission on the website, it takes you to a page that calls it committee.
Yes, yeah, I got that.
So-
I don't think it's anything to get really overly concerned about.
No.
We want to do
I
it
do.
right, but,
But-
you know,
but go
we'll
ahead.
call it a committee or commission.
I
really
think it's
doesn't
I think it's pretty important.
make a difference.
So either Carl either goes back and changes it on the website, or we all get paid.
Well,
So what do you want, Carl?
I'm sure. if we-
No, I don't think the status of committee or commission gets you paid. The only areas of the township that get paid are DPW, as well as zoning and planning commission, and those are roughly $25, but that's just my recollection from several years ago. When I was on DPW, it was $25 a week, and that was almost 40 years ago, and, you know, it bought you lunch for the week, and now it's just that and zoning only meets about every 3 months, it seems like, and planning, I don't know that they meet much more than $25 a month or a meeting, so. But I'd like to think that when we do it right, we're a commission, when we do it wrong, it's a committee.
Or it's somebody else doing it, so it's like, no,
Absolutely.
not at all. But again, so the Greenways Open Space Committee, we can go back and change that, we'll change that. Okay? Is there any other, because we'll get to the point where there's an action item, it's item number 3, but anything else on the welcome letters?
Well, I'm wondering, there's just this constant confusion on the parts of the public between the Grosse Nature and Land Conservancy and the open space, we'll just abbreviate, COMM, period. And so I think the Conservancy mentions both in its welcome letter, because it also does send welcome letters to new residents. So I don't know if we want to mention that, introduce right away this confusion that we think we're clarifying, or just let it go and let people figure it out as they go along. The Conservancy does have new signs, and so they're more easily to distinguish between open space properties and Conservancy property. Before, they used to be the same colors. I actually like the old signs better, but at least now it's visually it's a little different.
Well, how do you distinguish in your letter between the?
I think, well, it,
Oh.
it adds at least a paragraph to say, there's 2 organizations, in the township, and one is township and the other one is a private nonprofit, and blah, blah, blah. We have this kind of similar goals, but different.
Well, if you're already given the welcome letter as part of the Nature Conservatory, what if we just did a couple words on the enclosed is your, the paragraph where we talk about the guide, because the guide includes the nature areas and the open space. And if I can put a couple words of verbiage in there to
I can send you something.
to define the nature area and what that means versus open space with just like one sentence, then that would be probably doable.
Cliff, you had a comment, or go ahead?
Well, I did, but I think Theresa answered it. I believe, Theresa, if I'm correct, you do include the open space guide in with your welcome letter,
Right.
which Theresa and I put together a number of years ago, and it explains in rather in good detail the difference between the Grosse Ile Nature Land Conservancy and the Open Space Committee.
Right.
So I think with that, and you're going to make a couple word changes on it, Theresa?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that'll suffice, in my opinion.
Actually, as the coveted guide to natural areas of Grosse Ile that probably every Grosse Ile resident should have or want to have, the subtopic underneath, it says prepared by the Grosse Ile Open Space Greenways Committee and the Grosse Ile Nature and Land Conservancy. So I
Right.
think if you just include that, perhaps that would, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you include that on your welcome letters too from Greenways, the map? Yeah. So potentially they could get two of them, right?
Right. Okay, anything else on the welcome letter per se?
I guess that begs the other question, do you want to do them separately or do you want to do them together? Do we need a welcome letter for both?
Well, we've been giving, has this committee been sending welcome letters to new residents for a very long time? At least
Yes, we have.
you have.
Yes.
And generally, I know the township generally provides to realtors and churches and other organizations a list of like new residents. But I know in our discussions before, just because somebody is like new to the island, sometimes when you immediately send it to them, it's really going to the previous owner, okay? Because you got to give them a little time. So there should be like a little bit of a lag, if I'm correct in that analysis. Yes.
I had something I was just going to share, an idea that I came up with, and I was going to go to the township board and bring it up. It just seems like we need in our township a hospitality committee or commission, and it would welcome newcomers to Grosse Ile, and we don't have a welcome wagon anymore. But I visualize like Kyle DeBose has that beautiful azalea greenhouse, which is big enough to hold a lot of people. And since he goes way back to the founders of Grosse Ile, I visualize a hospitality committee or commission welcoming newcomers to Grosse Ile, handing out all the material they need, maybe a Rotary book included, but I'm going to suggest to the township board that there be a hospitality committee, and they would be in charge of welcoming newcomers and giving them everything they need to know about being newcomers to Grosse Ile.
Oh, that's great. I think that's a great idea. Good, thank you. So anything else on the welcome letter, Theresa?
No, I guess, so we're saying we want to keep it and we want to go on and we want to define, the two areas. And is there any other names that we're missing on the bottom or anything?
Are we, I know at one point you had like open, or there were some other, and we'll speak to that, but I don't think you necessarily need to include it in the letter. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. No.
Well, the reason I put it in there was to, catch somebody's eye if they
Yes,
wanted to say, hey, there's an opening. But, that means we got to change the letter.
I think
Which I
the
guess we gotta
guide
change the letter anyway.
does a real detailed job of explaining what the Open Space Committee is, what the Nature Land Conservancy is, but I think a couple of words or maybe a half a sentence or whatever, a phrase in the welcome letter would be a good thing to do.
Theresa, were you asking if we should combine the welcome letters in one mailing? Oh, I think we talked about that earlier. I mean, I think it would be a good idea. I don't know, Joanne Grunland, who used to be on the board of the Conservancy, she still does the Conservancy welcome letters, but we could,
Is there anything else that's included other than, I mean, obviously the letters are different, but are we attaching the exact same thing?
well,
If
It's-
we are, then it could be something different. If it's not, and you're doing, going from a different purpose, that's all I'm saying. And I would assume that your Greenways committee organization, which is funded by donations
yeah,
and
yeah, it's
stuff,
a membership,
is paying for those welcome letters, right?
right.
So I mean, that could save you some cost if we just did it through here.
Would you want to do a combined letter then?
That's what I'm suggesting if, they're essentially saying the same thing.
Yeah, I know, the Conservancy used to send out like a year's worth of newsletters to new residents, and I think now it's like one, because of the cost. So, I can bring that back to the Conservancy about having a combined letter, as long as we have the same list, to then, mail out the next newsletter to the new residents. That would probably work.
We have, however, an action item about approving the revised welcome letter, and so rather than, maybe that's a point of discussion at that point, how we want to go forward. Any other questions? Okay. Which brings us to our first action item, yes, I guess it's that time of year again, okay. We set as part of our goals for 2022-23 that we would have 2 every year of Dump the Junk, Find a Treasure. And so our first action item would be to authorize a Dump the Junk, Find a Treasure on September 24th from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. We know we were trying to coordinate with St. James Episcopal Church in their rummage sale, and so we were trying to at least try to get it before they were soliciting like donations or any kind of rummage that we may be able to provide them for their sale. We also, and I can at least inform people on this, is that the last one we did in the spring, we used Cass Community Services of Detroit came and we filled a box truck full of full of goods from the leftovers at the end of the day that were very useful items for them. I called Reverend Sue Patu, and right now they are understaffed and they are jammed with some of the materials that they have acquired at this point in time, so they're running out of storage space. So they will not be able to participate at the end of the day as we chose or as we did in the spring. We were also working with like Habitat for Humanity out of Monroe, and so as another alternate. So early in June, I had called and they said, "Oh yeah, we do Saturday pickups, and we're able to do this." And so I called today just to verify because we have a meeting, and I talked to Jim, the head of their transportation, and they said as of September 1st, we're no longer doing Saturday pickups. Okay, but they could make some arrangements like to pick it up on a Tuesday following. Well, that doesn't work for us in terms of our Dump the Junk, Find the Treasure program. So Plan C will perhaps be, try to get a flotilla, if you would, or a caravan of trailers, and if we can haul some of the stuff over to St. James Episcopal for the rummage sale, that would be one avenue. If we can take it to the Salvation Army or wherever else we can take it, that might be another, okay? But one way or another, we are looking at least, and I know Cliff has already made some action on this too, in terms of like getting signage. the action item is dump the junk, find a treasure on September 24th from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So, is there any motion to authorize the dump the junk at this point?
So move.
So moved by Mr. Geist,
Second.
second by Ms. Urbani. Any discussion? Okay,
I mean, you absolutely accepting that Monroe Habitat for Humanity can't come? Because this is not just, like driving over here, like doing a pickup at one person's house. This
Right.
is
oh no,
a worthwhile.
I explained it to him.
Yeah.
The other condition they put on it was that, okay, they wanted us to take pictures on our phones and send them all the stuff that was like left over so they could make a determination whether or not it's worth their while to come here or not. And I said, that's not going to work, okay, because first off, we have, a great deal of items that we need to, at the end of the day, we're trying to help and trying to, get it in the hands of people who can use it immediately or can use it. It's perfectly good stuff. And again, but keep in mind, Habitat for Humanity also may not accept furniture, may not accept knickknacks, it may not accept pictures, it may not, so there's some limits there too. I mean, certainly if they said, oh, like we had the last time, they, a whole bathroom vanity set, and that, somebody could use, it was perfectly well donated, or a half a pallet of shingles, that were there. So rather than to see that at the end of the day go into a dumpster, so that's why we're trying to put this other component to it, and I think that's important, that we do kind of reach out whatever we can do. So I have motion on the floor that's been seconded, and no further discussion. Okay, all those in favor of, go ahead.
I don't know if this is part of it or the next thing, but your Plan C sounds like the only viable plan that we
Right,
start soliciting people with pickups and vans.
whatever we can do, right. I did speak to Mr. Hartwell, who's with the Episcopal Church. I've talked to Father Dinwiddie at St. James, and was introduced to the person who was in charge of the rummage sale, whose name escapes me right now. I just met them on Sunday, and talked about, just to verify we can bring, and they were having a meeting and they would get back with us, but, so hopefully that's not one that is another avenue that's shut off, but I think it's a opportunity for them to take advantage of this.
What's the date of the rummage sale?
Their rummage sale is on the 29th, the 30th, and October 1st, so there's a 3-day deal, so.
You're talking St. James, right,
Yes.
Joe? They also typically fill up the capacity before their sale. Did they
Yes.
say, they say they'd take it regardless if they're full?
That they didn't say. Okay. I do know they start receiving their goods, I think, on the 12th, which is what's today. So we'll see how that goes. But again, I guess we'll make that determination.
Okay.
Okay. So all those in favor of the dump the junk for September 24th from 9 to 4, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good. The next action item, and I think Theresa, perhaps you can speak to this to a degree, okay, moving the open space sign on Manchester and Park Lane. And,
Yeah, so there's quite a few new people on Manchester, and they're confused as to how to get back the trail into Centennial Farm. And the reason for that is that trail's grown up a lot. Poison ivy and stuff kind of started growing there, and that kind of prevented people from walking on it. And now it's, grown even more. So I think we need to get in there and clear that out. And I suppose that's a phone call to TNT or whoever our contractor is, right? So I propose we clear that out, get that poison ivy away from the side of that. I don't know when the good time is to do that, but so you can get access to that trail again, and then put the sign there, because it never did make sense that the sign's down by the stop sign, but the entrance is, you know, 3 houses down.
Right.
So I don't know if that's because there isn't room there. I would think there'd be room for a sign. 'Cause-
I think originally Park Lane was supposed to go all the way through. It was going to be a connector. I mean, Park Lane, if you come on the island and you start at the north end of the island, it's bits and pieces, chop, chop, chop.
Right.
And then as you get to off of Manchester, that's where it ends, okay? But initially and originally, I think in the 60s and 70s and maybe 80s, they were looking to expand it all the way like to Rucker, okay? So Park Lane would have gone through. That's why it's a very large. And I think previous administrations have thought about, well, we can connect the bike paths can go through there, and we can make this kind of a connector in that regard. But there are some issues with like private property and residency and things of that nature, so where, you know, there's some concerns. But I think originally that's why the sign was probably put there in the first place, because the vision was like, okay, we're gonna be able to access it from there rather than, is that Heather Lane where the trail that cuts into Centennial Farm is?
Yeah, I think so.
So the proposal is to, my only concern, and this is a thing too, is that the right of way or the edge of the road, it's like if you put it to go into that trail off of Heather Lane, if we put the open space sign there, it's a question of how far back off the roadway does it have to be. I mean, I think the one at the corner of Park Lane and Manchester is pretty far back from the stop sign.
Yeah, so I guess what I would propose is if we don't have the authority to go to the side of the trail and put a normal size sign that we have.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how wide the trail is there, if, you know, we're just restricted to that trail and then it's, you know, private property on either side.
Right.
I don't know how wide the public property is, I guess. But if you don't have room for the big sign, I would say you do, you know, a little typical road sign that just says, you know, like a parking sign size that says open space and points to that.
Well, we have signs at a number of the trails, okay, that do have they're more like a mile marker or a small sign that's a post, not necessarily a big sign that identifies open space, keep the trails clean. It's like, so that might be a possibility.
I think there might be one of those, I'm not sure, but there might be a sign, an extra sign down at the
The DPS.
The OPS,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
down at the corner.
So, because the issue also is that road is no longer going to go through there, okay? And there's been a process, I know, working with Wayne County and working with private owners, that has been now changed over to private ownership, or it's been, so it doesn't make sense to have an open space sign on private property.
Yeah, I thought about moving, you know, we could move that one from its location, but it's kind of, I think it's almost at end of life anyway. It's going to rot apart. So what I propose is that we take that sign down and put a smaller one by the actual entrance.
Right.
And then when the bike path goes through there, then we put the open space sign where the open space starts, you know, at the end of that lot.
Refresh my memory, members, when you're in Centennial Farm and you're approaching from the east and you're heading west into open space there, is there a sign there that says open space? Because you could move the sign that's on Park Lane in Manchester. If there isn't a sign there that, hey, this is designated open space, you could move it there.
I think there's a trail sign there, but
Is there?
I'm not sure. I know what you're talking about.
Trail sign from Centennial Farm
Centennial
into the
Farm
open space.
that runs all the way west. You know, there's a trail. You know, I think
Well,
it's
there's a
more of
fence
an
there.
access point that runs all the way to Meridian. But I'm just looking at, if we're gonna move that sign and put it somewhere, or, as opposed to just put it in storage, which you don't wanna do, because signs are expensive.
Well, my point is, I don't think that sign, when you take it out, it's gonna
Oh,
rot.
so you think it's had its
I mean,
seen its day, huh?
I was gonna go out and sand it down and repaint it. When I looked at it, it was it's pretty bad, so.
I would encourage, regardless of what we do, talking to the rec director, Kim O'Farrell, and get her input onto that as well, since that is going to Centennial Farm. I don't know if she's ever had any issues or whether that leads into a paddock area. We do have a horse farm there where the horses are placed out in the paddock, and I'm not always confident it's good to have a trail next to horses. And sometimes people will, for the best of intentions, bring along something that may not necessarily be good for the horses, and
No,
horses may not always interact real well with people.
no, it's not that close.
No, it's not that
There's a big ditch to the right of the trail as you're going through the woods, and then when you come out, you're at the Centennial Farm, you're in exact same distance as the road from the fence.
Good.
Right.
So
Good.
it's,
Right.
So someone's gonna,
The action item is to move or remove the sign on Manchester and Park Lane, so since that's now designated as private property. First off, do I have a motion to approve the item to move the open space sign on Manchester and Park Lane?
Do we know who owns the private property there,
where's that?
where the sign is right now?
I do.
Okay, good. That's what I was hoping to hear.
No.
So we don't have any issues with the trespass or anybody. Excellent. That's what I thought.
So I don't know. Somebody else
Good.
should second
So you
it.
shouldn't move, right, correct?
Bill,
Yes,
I just have a side comment about dump the junk, find the treasure.
yes.
I've been on the committee for several years, and I remember when we were down in that little conference room, and we came up with the idea that not only dump the junk, but there may be some valuable things that people want to get rid of. And I thought we were so smart back then to make it a twofold. Dump the junk, get rid of the unwanted, but also there may be valuable things out there. And I found some really valuable pieces of
Yeah, that notation is still on,
Yes.
is on the open space signs
Yes.
that we're gonna be putting up.
Yes,
This
yes,
week.
very much, yes. No, I appreciate that. But do we have any other, do I have a motion? I will move to, to move the open space sign on Manchester and Park Lane.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Urbani. Any further discussion?
So are we saying we're going to remove it and add a small one, or I still don't think you can move it from one location.
You're just saying you're gonna take it down.
Right,
That's a move.
okay.
I don't think we know enough to be able to make a decision what.
Where we're gonna put it.
Where put
Okay,
up
but at least we'll
or
take it down.
what should be.
And then it's another question about, well, like,
Yeah, we can take it down now, put it in the storage,
right.
you know, as the public says, the EPS building, and then decide where we wanna put it later on.
So, this is just a point of question. Do we need to revisit the motion to include putting a smaller sign at the trail off of Heather Lane? To include that or not?
I would suggest that we hold off on that till we can investigate it a little bit and see what might work best and where it would go. Because it sounds like we also have another location, perhaps by Centennial Farm, that you might want to do
Right,
more.
we have to do that.
Okay,
Okay.
so do you want me to look at sign options for that trail in general? And on all those entrances and exits for that, what are we calling it, Centennial Woods?
Yes.
Okay. So
But-
signage requirements for Centennial Woods will be an action item for me, right?
You're saying at another meeting? Yes.
Right.
Yes, okay. But we have a motion on the floor to accept the action item number 2. All those in favor of moving the open space sign on Manchester and Park Lane, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
Okay. Next item is to approve the welcome letter as revised.
Phone number is this?
Mine.
It was very brave of you, Mr. Chair.
Well, it's
Well,
all about openness and open space, correct?
When I heard discussion here about, either combining it with the Nature and Land Conservancy or incorporating some additional wording in here, can we make a motion on something when we don't know what the final version's gonna appear as?
Generally not. Okay.
I guess I would say that combining is probably too early for that. I don't want to wait too much longer because I haven't really put out any letters this summer, so I'm waiting to get this letter fixed. So, I mean, I say we, if you want to come up with some verbiage like right now, we can skip on and then come back to this, and I'll have it done.
Well, I would recommend since we made it clear that we're a committee, and we've been called, like I said, we've been called worse. Anywhere where it says commission in this letter, we change to committee, number
Right.
1. Number 2, I think the other question was, we're trying to do something in conjunction with the Grosseal Nature and Land Conservancy, and I think identifying, not necessarily trying to confuse people anymore, okay? But if we use, when we talk about the Guide to the Natural Areas as prepared by the Greenways Open Space Committee and the Grosseal Nature and Land Conservancy, that at least gives people an indication that we're working in, like, with some similar visions.
So you want me to add after the parentheses, as prepared?
As prepared by the Grosseal Greenways Open Space Committee and Nature and Land Conservancy.
Yeah, you could put a period there.
Like, that we have an opening, or there are open positions on, to serve on that, or if you wish to serve. That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So with those edits, Mr. Geist, does that satisfy our?
I believe so.
Okay. Any further questions or edits? But again, and these would go out soon. I mean, like as soon as we can, since we haven't sent anything in July or August.
Right.
Right.
You've gotten a list from,
Yes.
that's the hardest part, I think.
Yes. Getting the list.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think, so I'll do we can approve the letter with the edits discussed. And I'll also send it out electronically for any other.
For
things.
final review. So, is there a motion to approve the revised welcome letter with the said edits?
So move.
So moved by Mr. Geist.
Second.
Second by Ms. Weeks. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approval of the revised welcome letter with the edits, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Good. These next couple ones are more informational than anything, other than the fact that we do know we have had some openings on the committee, and we're looking for a few good men and women. And again, the original 1994 and 2011 set the commission at 7 members. And we are, there is an opening, there's a vacancy, and certainly upon the passing of Mr. Filarski, that caused that. So if there's anybody out there in TV land, amongst the thousands of you who are listening, could you please consider serving on the committee, because protecting greenways and open space is what we're all about. So,
Bill,
yes.
I was going to suggest that maybe in the Grand you could put something, a column, do a piece about the open space is to enjoy and walk through, and not just drive by and
Yeah, right.
see that we preserve open space, but trails to enjoy,
Right.
and that we're looking for people that would like to maintain those
Yes.
open spaces, and maybe put an appeal out for new members.
Right, I can do that, yes.
Getting back to the vacancy issue, Margie Gape is the kind of the caretaker. If any resident wishes to join the Open Space Committee or any other committee or commissions, all they have to do is go in and put in an application
Right.
and give it to Margie, and then that request or that letter will end up in our committee if it's for the open space.
Yes.
So I think we should encourage
Right, very
that to be
much so.
done.
Right. But the other thing is, and I think we've tried this, and some have either gotten no responses, or people are too busy, or they're running around, they've got, their soccer moms and dads and are doing their thing with that. But again, we want, if anybody on the commission or on the committee wants to obviously know somebody that wants to get involved, or we can reach out to them, and please encourage them to make application to Margie Gape at Township Hall. It's not hard, not extensive, although you don't have to present your entire resume or your affiliations with others. So
That
yeah.
telephone number for Margie Gape is 676-4422. Again, 676-4422, and she's at extension 210. Again, 210. If you contact Margie, she will be glad to send you out a application, or as Bill has noted, come in person and do it. Hers is the desk right up front, and she's very pleasant. And tell her Bill Stevenson sent you.
Good, thank you. Any other further discussion on the commission vacancies? Okay. We received a call through, actually Derek Thiel relayed a call to me about an encroachment on open space off of 4th Street. And there's a process by which, that first off, as people are well aware, there's a $500 fine for dumping on open space greenways areas. So please be aware of that. Secondly, just because your property may be adjacent to open space doesn't mean you own that open space, okay? So just as open space is trying to be protected and sensitive to private property rights, so too must private property owners reciprocate and be sensitive to greenways, open space areas that are owned by the township. Part of the process now, since Mr. Gray has retired Tony Gray retired from the township as the enforcement officer, is that Julie Cordes has now taken over that role in terms of not only animal control, but also ordinance enforcement. So Julie was informed of the encroachment that was there. She went and, as did I, went out and reviewed the area and identified that. I think the next step was that a letter was sent from the township to the property owner, and they were given 10 days to remediate their encroachment. And so I think that's consistent with the policy that we have followed probably since the inception of the committee. Okay, so just to let people be aware of that. And again, just realize there is a process. So for people that are either new to the island or new to this committee, or just know that if you see something like that, you know, it's like anything in schools or in, you know, in airports. If you see something, say something, okay? And because it's our, you know, our township property that we're trying to protect and keep in its great state.
I would add to that, the last several encroachments we've had seem to be very innocent. People didn't know that they could, that they were that close, or they were necessarily encroaching on property. We had one person that was cutting trees, and what it took was just a brief conversation with the ordinance officer, both the old or the new. They realize they're doing something wrong. They also realize that the ordinance officer is going to be back to take a look at it, make sure that they're not continuing the encroachment. And most of these go away, and it's worked out very well. It starts out with a very soft knock on the door, followed up by a letter, and then if there is a continuing encroachment or continuing problem, then there is contact with the township through the attorney. If you do have anything that you wish to advise the township of, again, I would go through the building department, 734-676-4422. Again, 676-4422. And Brittany Buber at extension 229 is the person who would be a logical contact for that. She's at the desk. She is a very energetic employee, and 229 will see to it that there's some enforcement, some action taken.
Thank you. Very good. Our next item for discussion is the trail maintenance update, and I think I have a question about that because we received a phone call, which is a good thing. We're getting, you know, there's communication, but we received a phone call about some of the trails, okay, have been like overgrown, like they have not been in the last number of years. And the question arises, okay, is it the township's responsibility, the Greenways Open Space Committee's responsibility to make sure that if, you know, we're talking about trail maintenance, like some of these areas are cut, okay? And I guess that's a question I'd like to ask members of the committee who have been on the committee longer, is that is that something that we should be doing, or is something we should look into? Because even Theresa was talking about the, you know, like, hey, there's all kinds of poison ivy. People can't really get back into there. I know off the Manchester Woods trail right now, you can only go so far in. Okay, you know, the wood chips have been there, and then it narrows after the culvert that is there, and then it gets to a point, but then it expands again. Part of me wants to take just a lawnmower or a brush hog and go back in through there and do it, okay? But then you know, we talk about, okay, well, these are natural areas. You don't, you know, necessarily have to be mowing in a natural area. So I don't know, or perhaps we do. I mean, that's the question. So, yeah.
Yeah, the policy that we've always followed is that as far as trail maintenance is concerned, that is the responsibility of the committee to see that it's done. And you can do it a number of ways. We either have, in the cases of, hired a private company to go in and remediate the issue, or we have the public service people come in to come in and they'll take care of the issue. Lately, I think we've been depending more or less on the what department do we call it?
Public service. Right.
Public service department to do it, and we do it by just a simple ask. And if there's any remediation or any costs involved, those costs are transferred or cross-charged to the committee.
But Bert,
So, but it's my understanding that open space only maintains the official trails.
You are correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Every deer path that
Right.
people then
No,
follow.
if it's it has to be, you're absolutely right. It has to be an official trail.
there are 5 official trails that we maintain.
Right.
And, you know, and I think if residents, you know, are really passionate about an open space in their area and want there to be an official trail, then that's something they should bring to the committee and we can discuss it.
But I'm looking at it from this standpoint. So if we have 5 dedicated trails that we have, Okay, and I know that we've gone through with TNT and we've identified like 25 trees that over the course of between now and when it gets cold, because you can't cut them all, okay, or trim them, that we've identified that as part of our normal maintenance. Or if a tree falls on the trail that we maintain, it's a question of, well, you get rid of that tree and, we call them right away and that gets taken care of. My question here is, do we do mowing or should we do mowing in there? Keep in mind, some of these deer trails on the 5 trails that we have are maybe not as wide, because I think after they've culled the herd a bit, you don't have as many deer, okay, tromping back and through there, and you certainly don't have people on bikes or people on, kids marching through there playing whatever, because the outgrowth or the undergrowth is pretty severe in many cases. You can't get there.
It all depends on the condition of the trail. In some cases, all it takes is maybe somebody to go in there and put some more chips in.
Right.
Or in other cases, it'll require maybe a tree to be cut down.
Right.
Or in some cases, the trail might have to be widened.
Right. So by widening, should we? I don't have a problem telling DPS or anybody else, or I can do it. We'll get a lawnmower and do it. It's just a question of, is that an appropriate response on the part of this committee?
I think it is.
Okay, that's fine. But so that needs to happen. I can tell you, and Carl may be able to, or anybody else can. The Ferry Trail is, first off, the gravel base has been prepared, and it's a very nice, wide, certainly 8 foot or more all throughout, being prepared. I went by there this morning, and they're spreading wood chips on there. So they're making the progress in terms of spreading the wood chips on the Ferry Trail, because we would like to see like a ribbon cutting ceremony when that is completed, because it's been such a ordeal to get it to that point where it is habitable and you're able to travel through it. So, but that's in the process, and I think it's Rob Ponder, who I know is a DPS, was back there with like spreading the wood chips with a front end loader. So we're looking to see if that can get done. But there's some pretty big piles of wood chips that obviously are there, but it's long enough trail. But I just as an update. So I do also, maybe you can help me with this question. Okay, the trail from the Playscape, there's also one of our 5 that goes behind the post office in that area. I didn't have a chance to walk that, but I know the Playscape is now closed, if I'm correct, because it's been condemned, or there's been, so so if you have children that want to go to the Playscape, I said you can't. That park area is closed as of this point, because it's unsafe at this point. Built in 1991, I do know that, and it's seen its day too in some cases. So.
Oh, I thought Kiwanis put some time into it this year.
Yeah, well, but right now, I was just there also this afternoon. I was checking on the trails, and one of the things I saw was that this park is closed, and I have talked to people about.
It failed their basically safety inspection.
Yeah.
And the recreation department is currently evaluating new playscape equipment, a new location for it, and also are soliciting bids for the demolition of the existing playscape.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, we would also have to, when all that's completed, or maybe beforehand, officially close that trail.
Yes, right. The way I think it stands right now, it is closed. So you can't get back beyond that point to get to the playscape, and that's where the beginning of that trail is, right from the playscape.
Yes.
There may be a little side cut, but then there's a pretty good ditch. Right?
Bill?
Yes.
Way back when the Playscape was active, there was a trail, and I worked with an Eagle Scout to clear a trail so you could go walk in the woods there. It was open space.
Yes.
And you didn't get as far as a public safety building, but there was a tree that the trail went around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that going to be closed?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's closed right now. That's what I'm
Closed
saying.
now.
That part of the trail is closed
Oh,
because they've at least cordoned off the access point you've got to access it through the playscape area, if I'm correct.
Huh.
So right now, for all intents and purposes, it's closed, okay? Because it's a safety issue, as Ray said. Good. Okay, anything else? The property acquisition, Carl already spoke to, but again, we're waiting. I think we did have a study session in June with Derek Thiel came in, and for those of you that were there, we had some extensive maps or identified properties that are township properties that may be available. We also realize is that in our budget for property acquisition, it's pretty limited at this time. And over the course of how many ever years that it's been, when it was first passed in 2000 and maybe 11 perhaps or so, the original bond or the millage election for property acquisition.
That goes back to the mid-90s.
Yeah, I was going to say since '94. So in terms of that millage, as over the course of many years, it's now gotten to a point where our property acquisition budget is like $150,000. So let's just be aware of that. And again, when we're looking at acquiring property or making sense of buying township property to put into the open space program, as opposed to opening it up to public or private use, that's something. But we also know you only have so much money, and how much $150,000 go in terms of property. But we're waiting on the assessment from an analysis from MBA. So that's that.
Oh, excuse me.
Another thought I had, we have the Sunrise Park on the east side of the island. The Nature and Land Conservancy has bought property on the west side next to Bridge Road. And I visualize it would be nice to have a trail with maybe benches there and call it Sunset Park. And maybe we could work with the Nature and Land Conservancy to develop that as a trail going in, and maybe benches so people could enjoy a sunset view on the west side of the island rather than just a sunrise park on the east side.
I do know the east side one is getting a pretty extensive use, has been. Anything on the Nature and Land Conservancy on that property that she spoke of, Sunset Park?
I'm not up to speed on what the plans are
Yeah,
with that.
okay, good.
Bill, I have another. As part of the study session, there were some parcels that were reviewed and discussed that, at least more than one, that were at least would be considered wetlands and not really something that could be developed. And so I'm just wondering what the stance on the township is. Or I guess what I'm saying is there an advantage to wetlands being under the open space committee as opposed to just a direct ownership property of the township, considering that's not really going to ever be able to be developed in that regard? And whether a transfer between the two could be done at some kind of nominal cost and something like that.
Oh, that's a good question. I do know one of the fears in some cases, or one of the realities, is that just because it was designated a wetlands in some capacity, there may be, over a course of time, be going through different either regulations or other manipulations perhaps, is that some of these places that were wetlands are now, apartment buildings, or some of these places that were wetlands are now, it's been moved. So there's been that type, and I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to that type of thing, but I certainly know that, increasingly we talk about the loss of wetlands or the loss of that, and that's, if it becomes open space, and until we say otherwise, I would think, or until the township says, oh, okay, we're gonna sell these parcels, okay, because of whatever, strange, situation you find yourself in, it would be, until that time. But is there any advantage to doing that? I would think in some cases, if this committee could determine that that's going to be a viable area for us to preserve, okay, it's adjacent to one of our properties, or there's a potential to keep it out of another. That's the Humbug Marsh area comes to mind for me. Okay, is that what residents of southeastern Michigan did to help preserve that area, okay, because that would have been a development otherwise. So.
Right, yeah, the Save Humbug Marsh effort was to save the last mile of undeveloped land on the Detroit River on the American side,
Right.
and that was successful. There are legal ways to develop wetlands by mitigating it and, paying for the creation of wetlands someplace else.
Yeah.
Lots of illegal ways to develop wetlands, which shouldn't happen. The Open Space Committee was put in place to protect land from being developed. So theoretically, the township should give us wetlands to,
Right.
to be protected that open space shouldn't have to pay for.
And my thought.
Oh, that's good. No, I agree. I hear you. Anything else on that one?
It's important to note that the definition of a wetland isn't whether or not the land itself is wet, or whether there are times of the year when it's underwater, or during the typical cycle that we have, where it's about a 14-year cycle where you have high water and then low water. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, but it's defined by the type of vegetation that is there. So you have certain kinds of plants that will only grow in what's known as a wetland area. It may be dry for 9 months of the year, but depending upon the plant that's there, it may still be designated as wetland. It may also be wet for 11 months out of the year and be a wetland, but you have to look at the definition for both the local, that is the township, as well as the DNR, used to be, now what's known as Eagle, and what they use. So I encourage us to look at that. It would be logical, perhaps, for this committee to follow and essentially shepherd and safeguard wetlands, because there really is no effective voice at the township. We don't have an ordinance officer that is assigned to that, nor should we. We don't have somebody from the rec commission or the rec department. So I think it would be logical for us, when we look at the properties that are becoming available or not available because they're not buildable, perhaps there should be some assignment of oversight to this committee.
Carl, I apologize for improperly using the term wetlands as a generic description as opposed to, the defined one. I probably should have said back when I was a kid growing up, marshy or swamp areas.
There you go.
Yes.
The only reason I mention that is it's so that everybody in this room, and as Bill said, everybody watching at home understands that it's vegetation and it's not the footprint. If you put your foot down on the ground and it fills with water, that doesn't necessarily make a wetland. On the other hand, we do have some areas within our governance, such as Meridian Woods, that has what's known as a vernal wetland. And that's recognized as one of the few in the state, according to Mr. Kantz. And when Peter says that that's a vernal wetland and it's recognized, I think he has a great deal of expertise in that area. So when we look at that trail that goes from Meridian east to the drain, it does go through an area that drains out of a vernal wetland. So that's important to recognize, that even though that's dry in the summer and fall, it's still a wetland by definition in the spring. So, but no, I wasn't aiming at you on that, Mr. Geist. It was to get everybody else on the same.
No, it's a good point, and
same
point
page.
well taken. Thank you.
And the only reason I say that is I have some god-awful experience with wetlands on GROSSE, where I had somebody that was attempting to develop. The township had one definition, DNR had a second, and the Army Corps of Engineers was involved because it was within, at the time, 1,000 feet of a navigable body of water. So depending upon the definition, and you were required to use the largest and most expansive definition, that wetland went halfway up the hill, whereas the township was pretty much down along the stream bed, and DNR then was midway in between, so you were restricted to using about 40% of the property. But I think it would be logical for this committee to be the oversight for those kinds of concerns in those kinds of areas.
Theresa, anything on Adopt a Trail, Adopt a Plot? I know you're doing a lot of things, but
Yeah, no, I have not, well, first day of school. right?
Yes.
So I have not had any contact with the school.
that's one of the things that we will be looking at. And also, I think we can also expand it to other civic or religious groups on the island that might be interested in doing that. That's the only thing else. Saying no public for public comment, and we encourage you to attend our meetings. Our next meeting will be on October 4th, 2022 at 7 p.m. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Weeks, second by Mr. Bloetscher. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.